Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. I am, of course, not David Pakman. I think I've said that at the beginning of every segment so far, so there's no need for me to explain. I'm Benjamin Dixon, sitting in for David. Let's talk about the battle for Mosul. This has been a long-planned offensive by a combination of international forces. I think it's interesting that the forces that have combined to fight back against ISIS in Mosul have very different interests, and their interests actually are competing interests, yet they have combined to fight off ISIS and the so-called Islamic State's control over Mosul. And actually, Pat, let's pull up that graph that shows you all the different forces that are involved in this offensive. You see the pinkish territory is controlled by ISIL. The blue offensive that's coming from the government and its affiliates. This is the Iraqi government and its affiliates, including the United States. We have some soldiers that are there in a support role. You have the Kurds, the Peshmerga from Kurdistan. They are coming from the north and the northeast, coming down into Mosul. And then you have Shia and Sunni militias coming from the southwest as well as the northeast. I mean, all of these forces have competing interests. For instance, the Peshmerga, I believe the picture that's on our screen now is a battalion of Peshmerga fighters. Their interests, they are actually a semi-autonomous state that whose interests are to get sovereignty and to have self-determination for their people. That directly conflicts with the Iraqi government's goal. The Iraqi government, because the Kurdistan region actually intersects with Mosul. So the Peshmerga, they're fighting on behalf of their interests, on behalf of their sovereignty and their desire for sovereignty. And they're aligned with the Iraqi government, who's fighting for their sovereignty to push out ISIS. So in general, the offensive appears to be going well. It may last a full week, if not several weeks. But the big question is, how does this region survive after the absence of ISIS? After ISIS has been pushed out of the city, you have all of these competing forces who have different interests and could very well devolve into their own type of conflict. I guess this goes to the statement of the enemy of my enemy is my friend in this scenario, because each of these groups, rightfully so, could be competing enemies, but they have a greater threat in the form of ISIS. If you recall, about 2 years ago, ISIS swept down, literally in a storm, from Syria in the north and took the city of Mosul. And there's a picture of al-Baghdadi, who is speaking in front of a mosque, giving his orders to all Muslim people across the world. This is actually in the city of Mosul. This really is a defining moment in the plight of ISIS. ISIS, their legitimacy is based on whether or not they can actually build this caliphate, whether or not they can expand the reach of their region and have the legitimate use of force in those regions and control and have sovereignty over their caliphate. And if they lose Mosul, which is one of the last major cities underneath their control, you recall Tikrit was liberated in April 2015. Ramadi was liberated from ISIS in December 2015. Fallujah was liberated in June of this year. So major city after major city in Iraq has been and in the region has been liberated from the control of ISIS. So this completely obliterates the narrative that ISIS is some type of destined caliphate to control the region. And Pat, once you get rid of that narrative, you really undermine their most powerful propagandizing tool, which is join us because we are the servants of God to expand this caliphate. But you aren't really expanding a caliphate if you keep losing ground. So this is one of the reasons that there's so much weight being put on this particular fight in Mosul.
Yeah, if the allied Iraqi forces are able to recapture Mosul, and they're ahead of schedule now, this is only day 2, it would be a very strategic and symbolic victory They have far more troops, I think 90,000 compared to ISIS's 5,000 to 7,000. And it looks like the last major city in Iraq will be recaptured by the Iraqi government.
Yeah. And actually, we have a graph from CNN that gives you an outline of the forces that are fighting there. There's approximately 5,000 troops, ISIS fighters, rather, fighting in this conflict. There's about 98,000 total forces fighting against ISIS. Included in that are U.S. troops. Now, this report from CNN is actually a little low, actually very low in terms of U.S. troops. The last report, 600 new troops went to participate in this fight, to bring the total to about 5,000 U.S. troops who are participating in a consultative role. They're there as a support role. But you can see ISIS is completely outnumbered. Here's the problem with the battle in the Mosul. There's still 1.3 million civilians left in the city, and ISIS is already using them as human shields. This is urban warfare, so it's house to house, door to door, room to room. And this is a very difficult situation when you have so many people who can be used as human shields. So this is not a given. The victory is not a given. But with the numbers on the side of the opposition, it's very likely that ISIS will be pushed out of this major city once and for all.
Gamefly is sort of like Netflix for video games. They have over 8,000 new and classic games for Xbox One, Xbox 360, PS4, PS3, Wii, and a bunch of other platforms. And you can play as many games as you want for one monthly fee. And if you find some games you want to keep, you can buy them for a low used price. There's never any due dates or late fees, and our audience can get a free 30-day trial at gameflyoffer.com/TDPS. The games are shipped directly to you with return envelopes included. There's no contracts, and you can rent games through the mobile app. Get the free 30-day trial for the David Pakman Show audience and support our show by going to gameflyoffer.com/TDPS.